Hey there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. It's M back with the brand new season of RP Spotlight. Very first one of the season is, of course, our very good friend Vivanco. Vivanco, how are you today?
Hello. Hola.
So, first, as always, we're gonna ask you, how how did you come to nation states and then to TNPRP?
I came to nation states way back when. Uh, I didn't use at first this nation of Vivanco. I had another nation which was called the Thernia Islands, and I was in a really roleplay centered region, which kind of died as time went on, and my nation just ceased to exist. So I just created a new one 4 years ago. It spawned on the North Pacific, and I just went along with it. And when I found out that you could actually have a forum roleplay, a part of the roleplay that happens within the nation itself in the web browser, I wanted to give it a try, and I've been doing it my best since.
So, what as part of you joined the Heiress roleplay. Um, what really drew you to Heiress at that time?
Didn't really know which kind of roleplay I was really interested in. There was Stargate and so on, but it didn't really catch my attention as much as Eras, which is like a contemporanean roleplay of countries, and that really picked up my attention. I said, "This could be interesting," and I just said, "Hey, I'd like to apply on this little trait that for some reason hasn't been claimed yet," and I got it. And knowing some
Perfect.
shenanigans, I probably got less land than I asked for.
Yeah, you got to be careful with lore. Lore is a fickle god.
I am
So what
aware.
what inspired Vivanco? Like its culture and its politics and so forth.
Vivanco itself, it's kind of a mixture of southern Mediterranean cultures. It is basically, it's mostly based off Spain because it is the country I know best since I am from there, and it is where I can get the most riches from. Since I don't know much about other countries, I cannot really get more done with this. But I know more about the southern Mediterranean countries like Italy, Greece, and Spain and Portugal. But I mostly focus it on kind of Italy, Spain. It is based on them on the vastly rich uh, culture, but economically speaking, it really needs a bit more than a simple push.
Hmm. And what about its political system? Like tell us about how that works.
Oh, it is technically a constitutional monarchy. Is the perfect thing we could describe it as. But here's the thing: before that, it was the marquisate. I had to change it because legal reasons. Now it's a grand duchy, and basically the grand duchy, the great duke, uh, is basically the figurehead of the country. It's basically like a king, but it doesn't really. It's basically a king in all except in name. And under the king, there's the bicameral parliament, both the Congress and the the juntas representativas, representative courts or junts, and the higher house is the junta, and the lower house of the parliament is the Congress.
Okay.
It is of universal suffrage. I don't know if that's said properly.
Uh,
Excuse me?
You're talking about the voting rights suffrage,
Yes,
yes?
it is
Yeah.
universal. It has been universal since 1940s.
Hmm.
Before
A
then,
very
it was
progressive nation.
before then it was only male voting, universal male voting, which was acquired universally in the 1920s, and before that it was limited voting by only the wealthy people could vote back then.
So who is the current king of Vivanco?
The current Duke, the current
Oh,
Grand Duke
sorry.
of Vivanco, it's okay. It's called Petro Raimundo Vivanco, Dumate of the House of Miguel Xerae. It has been the Great Duke since the 29th of March 2017, after the abdication of his father, the Rex Emerito, Johannes Petro I.
And so how far back does that family line go in the history of Vivanco?
This particular house line is pretty recent. It had only come to reign in the late 1880s due to the end of the main line within the one of the major lines within the Spanish no, within the oh, sleep there.
Whoa.
Between the Vivancan royal family, which was the if I remember properly, it was the Delgado, like thin in Spanish. The House Delgado, which really came back to the so-called Age of Counts, which was the most unstable times of Vivanco, which was really back when in the medieval times, early medieval times.
So with that, what kind of importance does the Duke play in greater uh, Vivankian society?
Dirk is mostly a figurehead for the country. It is basically a way of the country to present themselves as something quote unquote unique and to present some stability within the state. Uh, Most of the international visits and interviews with other national leaders as well. And among their tasks is to the laws that are accepted within the parliament, the assigning after an election who is the chosen candidate to try form government with parliament.
Okay. So with that as well, how would you say the average person in Vivanco lives?
Yeah, Uncle, it depends. Within urban areas or rural areas?
Let's go with both.
Okay. So, within urban areas, you could say that the average person usually lives in an apartment. It isn't very common. Suburban areas, they aren't really common within Vivanco. You either live in a really urban developed area or in a really pushed aside rural area. Within the urban area, the average person probably has a average wealth of 60 repurues per year, which is pretty much enough to have always the fridge full, just one car, and there is a really stagnant decline within the birth rate. There's a really stagnant birth rate declining since the average population in Vivanco doesn't really start a family within urban areas until really late in their lives, probably in their 30s, 40s. Meanwhile, in the rural area, it is really common to see a small towns of pretty wide housing, two floors, quite cheap to be honest, and basically it's to live off the land. There is some problems with infrastructure and the way to connect the rural areas with urban areas. The way of life, it's pretty tough. If you want, there is not many connection with, for example, supermarkets or healthcare. But if you had a car or something, you can take the roads and go to the city. And they start families quite early, quite around the 20s, 30s.
Did I drop or did he drop?
Oh, no, I didn't drop.
Oh.
I don't know how to continue.
Oh, sorry. So we'll ask a couple of audience questions here just to take a break from my monotonous crap. Here's a question from Ark. What is Vivanco's stance on the rising tensions between fascist Asturica and various other nations?
The thing about Vivanco and Asturica is that there has been some times in which Asturica and Vivanco had some form of quote-unquote alliance, but didn't really last long. And they probably will see it as a threat, the rising fascist movement within the reach. And it really depends on the diplomats of each part, but knowing the rising Communist Party within Vivanco, they will probably raise the question to Parliament and ask for a military response if the Asturica joins the North Mediterranean War. But it also depends on the answer that Meta would have been among the conflict, because they are trying to integrate themselves further within the international community, and most importantly with Meta, and they will probably wait for a answer about what to do within this conflict, and once they know, they will act accordingly.
So another two more fun audience questions, and I expect good answers from you on this one. What is the most well-known food from Vivanco?
Now, here's the question for me to you. From which part of Vivanco?
All of them!
Well, then this is sure going to be a really, really long one. Because
that's okay.
Because if you want me to answer that, I'm going to open the cartography map and to aid myself when I'm talking. Okay. Let's see if it loads. Sorry, I should probably have prepared this beforehand.
Okay, man. It's all good.
Okay, so within the north, the gastronomically speaking, the north is quite rich. Even if it has a really mountainous region, the climate is quite tame. It isn't really snowy. It is rocky, yes, but it is a tame, warm environment, and so the gastronomically speaking, it is quite softened. It is really abundant the use in the north of olive oil and mostly tomatoes. And I say the most interesting dish, quote unquote, more of a snack from the north, it could be the so-called pan tomatico, which is basically a loaf of bread, lightly toasted, with with a small spray of olive oil on top, a tomato, and a pinch of salt. That's in the north. A quite simple snack, enough to get ready for the rest of the day. Within the Gulf on the east, it is quite common seafood. It is quite common to have seafood-based food and gastronomical yearnings, if that's the right wording. And I would probably say that the most famous one would be a small plate of guisarritos, which is like mollusks fried and with really hot sauce. And within the center and the east, it is where the most rural areas are of the country, and it is quite based on what comes from the farms, what comes from the ground, and the most famous one would be the so-called Vivancan soup, which is a pretty easy dish. It's basically a way to make up with the stale hard bread with paprika and garlic, and it is a tame, flavorful soup, which also helps to clean the kitchen of hard stale bread.
Those all sound pretty good.
Thank you.
So speaking of food and drink, tell us about Vivancola.
You heard about Vivancola, sir. Well, then, if you excuse me, I'm going to search for my thread about speaking about Vivancola. Okay, Vivancola. Here we go. Are you guys ready for this blatant advertisement of the most exported good of Vivanco? Vivancola is kind of like in the real world Coca-Cola. Although it is not based on Coke, it is a beverage, a carbonated beverage, based on cabbages. I know it sounds weird, but hear me out. It had begun being done as a medicine for a small fever that went around the country of Vivanco in the early in the early 1904, the 04 pox, as it was called, and cabbage in Vivancian is called col with a K, and so a Vivancian scientist created this beverage, this kind of called cola, more like, and tried to do it because of the main ingredient, cabbage. It had some form of chemical reaction that made it pretty much almost like a fermentation, and made it bubbly, like it basically carbonated. It didn't really help for the pox, but it did gain some popularity within the people, mostly because of the carbonization and the gas within it. Because people used it not as a drink to enjoy the flavor, but for better digestion, for stomach aches because of the gas within it. And later, the son of the inventor of the cola, Hermenegildo Dos Dedos de Frente, his son created a company to try to give this invention a more mercantilistic, to try to sell it. And so Eufrasio Dos Dedos de Frente founded the company in 1942 and started to distribute it nationwide. And since then, they have tried with multiple flavors, like, for example, lime, orange, and cherry. But the cabbage one is still the most sold because it's the most neutral flavor. It isn't really an intrusive flavor, and it is mostly used because of the gas within it.
And so, how much does a bottle of Vivancola usually sell for?
Probably say it can sell in cans and in glass bottles. It is mostly common to use bottles because you could take the bottles to specified containers within Vivanco to put the bottles, and they gave you a little change back so you could continue and to help to not contaminate. I would say that it is quite cheap. It is like one repuro and a half, like $1 almost.
That's a pretty solid price for a soft drink of that caliber.
I mean, it's pretty cheap to produce. Cabbages are really cheap because of mass production of farms, and so they can get it done. It's really common in Vivanco, mostly in the rural areas, for people to do their own Vivancola.
So now that we've covered that, what is the most popular alcohol in Vivanco?
The most popular alcohol in Vivanco, it is going to be wine. Most probably, the Vivanco isn't really that high of a quality, so most of the wine that is consumed in Vivanco is exported from Saint-Ouen. Saint-Ouen, I don't know.
Saint-Onge. So another audience question from Bork. What is the largest city in Vivanco, and what is its architectural style?
Vivanco has two main one, and the next one is the the capital is Petria. It has architectural style of Baroque. It was a small town that out of the sudden of a war and so on became the major player within Vivancan politics. What? Hello?
Yep,
Hello?
we can hear you.
Okay. Since Castro said that, where did I cut out?
About right at the start.
Okay. The major cities in Vivanco has two major cities, and the biggest one is the capital city, Petria. It has a Baroque style of architecture. Most of the noble buildings, at least. There are some buildings are earlier, but they don't really have much attention since most of the buildings that don't go along with the noble aesthetic of the old Petria. Most of them were demolished, sadly. there's a really Gothic, late Gothic, early Baroque aesthetic to most of the uh, buildings, mostly the administrative buildings. And the other major city is Rethan, which was the old capital of an ancient kingdom within the borders of Vivanco. And that city has a really medieval um, uh, aura and architectural style, with some sort of within the most center of the Rethan, almost touching the Lake Rethan, which is like in literally the middle of Vivanco. That's Lake Rethan. There is some ruins of Greco-Roman style.
Here's a good question that I'd actually like to know myself. What are the Vivanquian armed forces like?
Armed forces. First of all, they are volunteers only. They do not. There is no conscription within Vivanco. They rely only on volunteers. It isn't a really strong military speaking nation. It doesn't have much manpower, but what it does have is technology. Vivanco has a military mind of try to spend less time in investing in having more people, but in having better equipment, better armament, better defenses, so that we don't need that much people to commit to have the same power as others. It isn't really strong manpower wise, but within technology, it is fairly strong, Vivanco.
Hmm. So, kind of moving on from that, I'm gonna try and hit you with some really random, rapid questions here for
That's
you.
what I like.
Who? Okay, actually, we're gonna start with what? What is the most popular sport in Vivanco?
The most popular sport in Vivanco is football.
Of course, it is. Fantastic.
The
And who's the most famous footballer?
most famous footballer is Federico La Rosa, which is the brother of the current mayor of Petria, and they basically have a astonishing career within the Petria football club. And there are some words that probably they will go away to another team, but who knows what happens.
So, what? Who is the most famous or infamous politician in Vivanco?
The most famous politician in Vivanco. I had this prepared. Give me a moment. Where is it? Where is it? I swear I had this prepared. The most famous politician in Vivanco is Gerardo Ifarral, which is the first democratically chosen mayor of Petria. He was the strongest political player within Vivanco in the 18th century, and it is one that pushed the Great Duchy to improve the labor's rights, but not really by much. In the end of the day, he was tried as a traitor to the country and executed. And since then, he has become one quote unquote political martyr for the left within Vivanco.
What is the most consumed type of cheese in Vivanco?
The most popular kind of cheese, it can depends on the zone, but it is mostly sold sheep cheese. Really aged sheep cheese. This kind of cheese really aged based off sheep milk. It has a really strong flavor. Doesn't stink, but it has a really strong flavor. It's called añejo, like aged in Vivancian.
What is the leading automotive manufacturer in Vivanco?
The leading automobile manufacturer is Vivanco. I don't really know, but it's probably a subsidiary of an international brand that could have a small quote unquote Vivancian brand, which is Beta with VETA. That it used to be a national company for doing cars, but in the end it was privatized and bought to the highest bidder internationally.
Two more questions from Pred. One, what is the population of Vivanco?
I will only say it's a lot. Let me check my cheat again. The population of Vivanco is almost 20 million people.
And sorry, I've lost the page here. What is the leading cause of death in Vivanco?
The leading cause of death in Vivanco is heart failure, sadly. It has some, most of the deaths about heart failure come from there was this medical term that I used back then when I described this, but I cannot really remember it now, so I will leave it at heart failure.
Fair enough. What is the... Oh my god, I'm sorry. I just had it, now I've lost it.
Welcome to the club.
What is the main agricultural export?
The main agricultural export in Vivanco is wheat.
Wheat. Fantastic.
Wheat, yes. Mostly from the center of the country, from surrounding areas of the Rethan Lake. It is a really the most rural places. Most of them do wheat, cereals in general, but mostly wheat. You can probably see why in Vivanco the second largest alcoholic drink is beer.
Fair enough. Another one from Pred. How does gas arrive to most Vivanquian households?
Gas arrives by the pipes.
By the pipes. Mother.
I mean,
All right.
I'm very wrong. No, but Vivanco gets most of the gas via natural gas from the seas that are shared with. They probably get their oil from the north of Meterra. If there is a gasoduct that transports gas from the north to the south, they probably are quote unquote leeching off of it.
When was Vivanco founded?
It was founded in the late 13th century. Before that, what is now known as Vivanco was the kingdom of Rethan. The king of Rethan died without a and heir, and the count, the highest nobility in Rethan, it practically erupted in a civil war to see who had the biggest stick, who has the biggest army, and who is going to be the leading voice within Rethan. And by sheer luck and a lot of marriages and so on, this period of time was called the Age of the Counts. It was a really fractured time in current Vivanco. Practically every count was on its own. There was no central government. It was practically a completely independent counts. Each of them claiming to have supremacy over the rest of them, and by marriages and so forth, the duke it was chosen as a protector of Rethan, as protector of Rethan, the count of Vivanco, which was the zone of current Petria, which was a really impoverished area, but still, since it controlled the Gulf, it had some importance. And from that point on, it really developed. That's why it is not the Kingdom of Rethan or Kingdom of Vivanco, but the Great Duchy, because it really encompasses the history of not being the king, but being the protector of the land from this place.
What is Vivanco's goal within Meta?
Vivanco's goal within Meta is to establish themselves as a still predominant global power. They used to have its peak of power was in the 15th century. It's when they had the most expansion. They had colonies here and there, but as time went on, they kind of decreased. And their intention in Meta is to maintain that they have still importance within the world, that they can play an important part within the globalized world, and mostly of the strategic value of the country of Vivanco within the Rethan Strait that practically divides North Matera and South Matera.
What role does religion play in Vivanco?
In Vivancan culture, religion is really strong. It Vivanco itself has its own kind of church since the late 16th century. The Lady of Vivan, the Church of Our Lady, Lady of Vivan, which was a local saint. It is based on Messianism, and practically it is a schism in which it defied the role of an organized church, and it is based on the Hussites and the Protestants on the real world. In Vivancan culture, it is kind of strong, mostly architecturally. Most of the national dates and holidays are based on religion, and approximately 60% of the population is religious in Vivanco.
And what is the actual majority religion of Vivanco?
The actual majority religion is actually the Church of Our Lady, with a minority of Messianism and other religion, but the biggest religion is the Church of the Lady.
Has there ever been any kind of religious violence in Vivanco.
Yes, definitely. Mostly when the Church of the Lady was established, Vivanco entered a really cruel and bloody civil war because between those that remained messianism as purely messianism and those that embraced the fact that no organization was needed in order to profuse the religion, and that there was no need for clergymen and so on, that the only good thing of the religion was not the clergyman but the book, and live by the book basically.
Okay. So I think I just have one more question for you here before we wrap up, and that is, what is Vivanco's stance on gay marriage?
Gay marriage is currently legal within Vivanco. It has been legal since the 1950s. It had been illegalized shortly in the 70s because of political disputes between the Conservative Party and the Progressive Party. But it is currently legal. Not illegal, legal.
Well, it seems you've built yourself a fine nation.
Well,
Thank
thank
you for
you.
your time. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining us.
It has been my pleasure to be here. I will probably be in the rest of them throwing other questions to the rest of people again.
Just the way we like it. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in to another RP Spotlight. Thank you to our guest Vivanco, and thank you to Casto from the Ministry of Radio for coming in to record for us. I hope you guys have a fantastic day.